And hello, and welcome to the Global Ocean Freight Maritime Conference at FreightWaves. We're so pleased to have you here, and we have a great session today. First off, I'm Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Audit, a global ocean freight refund consultancy company based here in Hartford, Connecticut. Now, before I introduce today's session, I have to tell you guys, growing up in Boston, I'm a huge New England Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. And I have to tell you that looking at Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, Bill Belichick is a coach where, I don't know if he gets the credit as a quarterback whisperer. And there's some debate whether Brady won all these Super Bowls with or without Belichick. But the bottom line is that when I look at Bill Belichick and I consider him, say, a quarterback whisperer, my next guest today is the logistics supply chain professionals quarterback whisperer. He is one of the most professional guys I know in the whole field of talent and talent management. And I'd like to introduce to our session CEO and founder of Logitalent, my good friend, Bill Paul. Bill, hello, Mr. Whisperer.
Good morning. Wow, I don't know how to respond to that, Steve.
Well, I'll tell you. Listen, peace and love. I think that when people look at this whole thing of Containergeddon and they look at the physical and the mechanical parts of it, ships, cranes, containers, ports, they're not looking completely at the talent side of it. And the talent side of it and the mechanical and the operational side of it go hand in glove. And there's no better assessor of talent or where the talent needs to be than yourself. And I say that with my wholehearted recommendation and endorsement. I'm so glad to have you on our virtual stage today, Bill.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, it's terrific. So let's start the session. I'm really interested in, I've termed this, kind of came up with this term I've called Containergeddon as we start to fight through this thing. And it's been a year like no other, right? I mean, we have these two double-headed monsters of COVID, and we have containers unexpectedly performing, and somewhere in the middle we have the human capital that needs to make it all working and worthwhile. Before we kind of get into that, first tell me a little bit about your role at Logitalent and how you fit into these two dichotomy pieces of the supply chain of the COVID and the need for talent to move the needle forward in Containergeddon. So let's hear a little bit about Logitalent and your role.
So this is my 51st year in freight forwarding. Got into freight forwarding back in 1970 in the UK. Came over here as a 25-year-old to Chicago 41 years ago. Stayed in freight forwarding. In 1994, started my first logistics recruiting company. Sold that in 2012. Actually went back into freight forwarding for 3 years and then started Logitalent in 2015. And the demand for talent just never seems to go away. And what I learned over time was that if we could keep finding and delivering great talent, then we would have a business for life. And so the nice and natural thing for us was that all of our client companies are global, and they all have offices throughout the US. And so we built a team of recruiters. So we're in Los Angeles, we're in San Antonio, we're in Dallas. There are several of us in Chicago. We're in Miami, Atlanta, New York, New Jersey. Every one of us came from the freight forwarding industry, so we speak the language. And our client companies found that, to be of enormous benefit that we understood them. And we really limited the number of client companies that we took on. We determined that there aren't that many great companies to work for. And so, our philosophy is if we would work for that company, we'll recruit for that company. If we would hire that candidate, we'll try to place that candidate. And so that's where we are today, a team of about 12 across the US, largely focused with global freight forwarders. We have a separate division that takes care of the domestic truck brokerage.
It's a really smart move. I think that one of the things that we talk about a lot in the trade is just the predominance of global freight forwarders having more market share, right, than ever, right? In the Trans-Pacific, for example, I think it's somewhere in the 47-48% share. And just to confirm or to help validate for my audience, your specialty, would you say you have a niche focus in the freight forwarding, or do you also help the VOCC side and the BCO side, but it's mainly freight forwarding, correct, Bill?
It's almost exclusively freight forwarding. We try to stay in our lane, and given the fact that lane has been incredibly, generous for us, we've tended to stay in that lane. We get inquiries from time to time, outside of that. We'll help if we can, but, we are primarily focused on our global freight forwarding clients.
And Bill, did you find it all? I know that, to me, it's a little bit of a dichotomy, right? I look at my role in ocean audit and I think to myself, here's a bunch of men and women and talented professionals all over our great country and all over the world, really, working out of their homes, and volume and cadence of processing of materials and invoices and operations increasing. And profits are increasing. And so the big question I want to ask you as you start to look at the talent and the people that see you in this beautiful virtual stage will say, hey, maybe I really need Bill because, this is a hot market and I don't know if I'm in the right spot. My question is it a hot market now for hiring?
100%. Malcolm Forbes once said that ability would never exceed the demand for it. So where talent exists, let me use another expression that, you don't have to buy a cow to get a pint of milk. So while we see companies making all sorts of acquisitions, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. What they're really buying is human capital. They don't necessarily need the buildings or the leases and all that kind of stuff. They need the human capital. So, what we do is we do, acquisition on a very, very minor scale. So we're doing talent acquisition. We're delivering candidates that can make a difference to a particular company at every level of freight forwarding, from agent level all the way on up to the executive suite.
It's interesting you say that, Bill. I think that, I was just doing a study the other night on Amazon, for example. I was looking at their jobs in logistics, and I found a couple that looks like they're starting to promote their NVOCC services. And so, we have these job boards, and, everyone loves a job board, right? And I'm sure that plays a role too within Logitalent. I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you as well, and going back to that kind of quarterback whisperer type analogy, is a lot of my friends and a lot of the talent that I know in the industry in freight forwarding, they're senior talent, and they're highly respected, and they're, some may be, looking for the next opportunity. I guess what I wanted to ask you is I used to always think of the hidden job market versus the published job market. Is there still such a thing in freight forwarding?
Absolutely. And let me go backwards a little bit, because, we aren't necessarily focused on the candidates that are posting their resumes on job boards. I still think, the best candidate is probably the passive candidate, the one who's not necessarily looking. And that's where our expertise really comes in, to go out and find those candidates. And of course, we're networking, and we're using years of experience in the industry and referrals, and the fact that we stay very, very current in what's going on in the industry today. So, in terms of the needs today, what we found is that you kind of got to predict the market a little bit. So, yeah, were we worried last year when COVID hit? Were we worried when companies were making massive layoffs and doing hiring freezes? Absolutely. But, we decided to be very proactive. And I gave a directive to our team to go out and find as many ocean import people as they possibly could, knowing that, that business would come back, and knowing that many, many of our client companies would run lean because they didn't know the true impact of COVID. Would that just really bring business to a screeching halt? Clearly not. Clearly not, because we're seeing record numbers of imports from Asia, for example. And so we kind of stockpiled those candidates. We went out and found them. We recruited them. We qualified them. We interviewed them. We found out, where they might be the best fit. And so when that demand started to hit, when we saw that kind of November, December, and it's continued through January, February so far, we were able to deliver the kind of candidates that our client companies were looking for.
Bill, it's amazing what you talk about there. And I think I can't remember if it was you or another friend of mine, it might have been yourself, that posted a graphic. It was a shirt, and it said something like, if you're in logistics, you can never understand the type of experience I go through. Do you remember that? And, I think about that. I remember it was a blue shirt. It was weeks ago, but it was just it resonated in my mind, because you're absolutely right. I just told my wife last night, I said, honey, I don't know if I can sleep. I got 25 things. I got this Bill Paul thing. It's going to be a tough one. No, I'm kidding. And I just said, it's a lot of work, right? And I said to myself, I wonder sometimes whether I still have the skill sets, to do these 25 things at once. And I know I do. But my question is, if you start to think about that logistics is a tough business, you have no idea what I go through. I think it's a natural question. So what are some of the qualities and skill sets that somebody would have that they would get the meaning of that shirt, and they would be, top of the line for great placement? So let's talk a little bit about some of the skills and qualities that you think COVID, post-COVID, e-commerce, that people need to have generically, and then we'll kind of delve down into it.
Sure. You might be surprised to hear that, I don't always put experience at the top of the list. There is not a single person in freight forwarding today who was born with experience in freight forwarding. Everybody learned freight forwarding. And so I think you need to look at what industry are we in. And, as difficult as that is to explain to people at times, I suppose the easiest analogy used to be with travel agents for people, for people. But nobody knows what a travel agent is anymore, so we've had to change that a little bit.
But the Expedia of logistics, how about that?
And so we're in the communications business. That's what the people in this business do. They communicate. And so the first skill that I think everybody needs to look for are people with great communication skills. You want to hire for attitude and train for skills. You can't generally teach somebody to have a great attitude. They have it or they don't. And so, we look for people with great attitudes, and then you can teach them the skills. We want people who are very adaptable and flexible. This industry runs 24/7, 365. And so you want people who are able to adapt and flex and pivot. You want people who've got great problem-solving skills. You want people who have the ability to handle and overcome some adversity. People with a sense of geography, some good basic math skills. Obviously, team players, that's a bit of a cliche. You want people who are organized and disciplined, because follow-up is absolutely critical. And you want people who've got great customer-facing and customer service skills. This continues to be, and I can tell you 50 years ago, it was a people business. Today, it's a people business. In 50 years' time, it'll be a people business. That's not to diminish all the technology that's come into play, but this is still a very people-oriented and a relationship-oriented business.
It's really exciting to hear you talk about that. I'm reminding myself now of a talk with Gary Vaynerchuk, where, in this Global FreightWaves conference, Gary is speaking, and I talked to him about storytelling and personal branding and the ability of communicating. And, Bill, you touched on something a few minutes ago. We talked about the skill sets, and you said the number one skill set was communication. And so I've been on LinkedIn many, many years, and you too, and I constantly see your excellence in communication on LinkedIn and social media. I know it's a strange question to ask, and maybe no one's ever asked you this before. That's why I think it's a cool question. But do you see a correlation perhaps between somebody's social media output and how they might be perceived as a candidate Does that make sense?
100%, 100%. And I think people started to get a little bit wary, some years ago, when, let's say somebody had an email address that was partyanimal69. It's like, you know what, that needs to change. And then the things that you're posting on social media, do you really want a prospective employer to see that? You upside down drinking from a keg might not really appeal to an employer. They want to see you be responsible. So, the social media element and as we're seeing now through COVID, the ability to be on camera. This still is a little bit of an alien thing for me. I certainly envy people like you who have mastered, being on camera and do a wonderful job of it. It's something I need to get better at and something that I work to get better at. But we're seeing more and more interviews now. They're on camera and they're panel interviews because companies want to accelerate the process. So in the past, where we had a candidate that went and met somebody individually, now the candidate is having to appear on a screen, and that candidate is having to interview with several, with several people from the company. So I think you need to be great at social media. You absolutely need to be great at social media.
On the other hand, if you think about it too, I mean, I don't know how you feel, but I mean, I definitely miss the travel. I mean, I'm kind of a people person. I'm not a party animal, but I'm a people animal. I love connecting in person. And, I've been through so many beneficial cargo owners, and I've met so many great, logistics manager men and women, people of all walks of life. And, it's interesting because you could have a really terrific book smart person on IMCO terms or anything regarding the supply chain, but they're, more of a quiet and reserved person. So they may not be the social media person, or if they are a social media person, they're just posting other people's stories, to kind of, put it out there. So, I mean, I guess, when you are the people whisperer for your clients, you've got to take into consideration that, okay, well, this person is maybe a little withdrawn, but they know their P's and Q's. So how do you slot people like that?
Well, you have to coach candidates. I think that any candidate that chooses to work with us gives us an awesome responsibility. We are getting involved in their career. We're not finding jobs for people. People can find jobs on their own. That's a no-brainer. We're finding careers for people. And so, we need to coach those people. We need to encourage them to do their homework, to do their research, to be prepared for certain questions. They need to be asking questions on the interview, and they need to be good on a camera. And so that's something that comes with practice. And it kind of takes me back to, from a career advice perspective, that, I think we should all be asking ourselves on a daily basis, what am I doing to get better at what I do? Am I of greater value to my employer today than I was a year ago? If yes, how? If no, why not? And so every one of us should be striving to get better at what we do, and we should be striving to adapt to the new environment. And if the new environment is going to be more work from home, more remote work, more time, instead of being in front of a customer, where you're sitting down with the customer, where you're going to be on a camera with the customer.
I love that. I love that because I think it does show the new world where, that shy logistics gal or guy, maybe they have to spend more time and in front of a mirror, in front of a camera, and refining their skill. But Bill, let me ask you this question as we start to segment out in terms of this great conversation that we've had today. I always like to leave a segment with somebody like yourself that I believe is one of the more competent experts in the world on this. So let me just ask you, what would be your 3 takeaways right now for our global audience of those looking to excel their careers in freight forwarding or start to move up? Can you give us 3 quick takeaways that you would suggest that they start working on?
Sure. Okay. Number one is you have to stay knowledgeable in your industry. So you've got to stay relevant. You've got to know what's happening in your industry. And not enough people in this industry are taking time to do the homework, to do the research, and to learn more about what's going on in the industry. You've got to stay relevant. You've got to keep your skills current, and and you've got to adapt and add new skills. So if that skill is that you need to become better on a camera, then that's something that you need to do. And you've got to be stable. The rookie interviewer who sees a candidate who's bouncing all over the place but is not progressing, that's the red flag that they're going to use to rule that candidate out. And so, don't just jump for dollars. Think about this as a career, and be very, very careful about making that next move.
I love that. It's almost like, don't mean this as a book, but it's almost a purposeful driven life. I think you've really hit all the nails on the head. And, I can't thank my guests so much enough today for all these great contributions today. You've been watching Bill Paul, CEO and founder of Logitalent. Bill, I do hope you'll come back on my Navigate B2B show, and it was awesome to have you today as my guest. How do people reach you?
You can go to our website, www.logitalent.com, or just follow me on LinkedIn, Bill Paul. Just check me out on LinkedIn. I post a lot. I hope it's relevant. You get a lot of good feedback and a lot of good recommendations. So, and I have a little bit of fun as well. So, and I would love to join you on more of these kinds of things to help me get better at what I do in front of a camera.
I think we have a lot of segments to cover that we didn't have time today. So I want to thank you all and enjoy the conference, everyone. You've been watching my conversation with CEO and founder of Logitalent, Bill Paul. I'm Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Audit, signing off from now. Continue to enjoy the conference. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks. Have a great day, everybody.